Hey crappie fishing fans, this is Lynn with Lynn's Guide Service. We're out here on beautiful Mark Twain Lake, and we're going to show you a few techniques today about trying to catch some crappie. We're keeping it real simple today. We're just using a lead-headed jig, and some of them are bare in color, and some of them we're going to use maybe a chartreuse and a white. And we're just putting a minnow on there. Nothing really technical about it. Keeping it real simple. And what we're going to be fishing is we're going to be fishing some bluffs, and we're going to be fishing some rocks and some drop-offs. You know, if you look on the bank over here, you'll see some logs and stuff that are laying down, and we're going to you know, pitch this jig around them logs, and a lot of times the crappie, they suspend around these kind of things. Any kind of debris or a little bit of lay down logs, anything that's down there that comes up off the bottom, the fish like to suspend around in there. We're kind of close to what we're doing today, so what we're going to do is we're just going to pitch right in there. We're going to come right down the side of the log, and you know, hopefully we'll get a fish or two to react today. We're starting a little bit shallow. I'm holding the boat in about 15 to 20 foot of water, and we're going to just bounce this jig right down the contour of that bank, and when we come next to one of those limbs or somewhere down there where the fish want to kind of hang out, you know, they usually will react to it pretty quick. When I'm coming up to one of these logs to fish it, you know, I like to fish the front side of it first, and if the fish don't react to it, reel right back up, and then pitch on the left side of it. And kind of just cover it in a manner to where, you know, you put that jig around all sides, all limbs, try to cover it just best you can. Right now we've got a cloudy day here, and temperatures are running about 55 to 60. Water temperatures is about 53.5 degrees. So we're starting to cool down a little bit, being fall. It's November 6th. And typically this time of the year when the water's cooling down, you know, the fish will tend to move shallower. We kind of got two bites going. We've got a shallow water bite starting up, and we've got a deep water bite. So one way or the other, hopefully we'll get bit. Show you a couple of these nice fish. Right now we're fishing in a cove that's real close to the dam. If anybody's familiar with Mark Twain, if you was to leave Blackjack Marina and come straight towards the dam, it would be the last pocket on the right before you actually get to the dam. Kind of a popular little spot. Deep water, has very steep banks, a lot of cover in it. If you look ahead of me here, you can kind of see these logs that lay up this bank. We're going to run up here real quick and fish a little deeper technique and see if we can pick up a fish or two. We have a lot of high hills here on this lake, and you know, the wind right now out on the main lake's blowing about anywhere from 20 to 25 mile an hour, and a lot of times, you know, you can get back in these coves and you play the wind a little bit, and you know, you can get back here where there's some calmer conditions, more tolerable for the fishermen. A little bit easier to run the boat when the wind ain't blowing. We'll probably end out on the main lake sometime today, and you know, so it will be a little windier out there, but we're just going to see what we can do back in this little cove. When you're fishing this kind of structure, a lot of times there's a lot of limbs and stuff off the ends of these trees, and these fish suspend under these limbs, and you get caught up quite a little bit. You know, you get hung up, you get snagged, but you know, the old saying is if you don't get hung up, you're not fishing in the right spot. So it's okay to get hung up, you know, it's okay, because these fish, you know, they just love to hang around tree limbs and these little real gnarly places. A lot of times, you know, the fish will be up on top of that cover, but a lot of times they'll be buried right down in the middle of it. So you know, you got to fish in and out of it, and you got to take your chance. You can't fish scared. You got to get right down in that stuff. And I like to use this yellow line because a lot of times these fish are biting real light. You don't feel it in the rod. So a lot of times having this yellow line is a visual thing, and it helps you detect a strike before you actually feel it up in the pole. I can kind of see that line either twitch or it'll snap before I ever do feel it in my hand. So I'm really not trying to depend on the rod to tell me what's going on. I'm actually visualizing. So a lot of times the visual part of the bite is a lot better than trying to feel the fish. By the time you actually feel the fish in the rod and you set the hook, you're a little bit too late. So watching that line is very, very important. There was a bite. I missed him. I'll bait up here again and see if we can get one to go again. Now when I hook my minnows, I always hook my minnows up underneath the chin and straight up through the top of the head between the eyes. That seems to be the toughest place on the minnow. Makes it a little more difficult for the fish to get the minnow off of there. Keeping my bait very compact and very straight in line. A lot of times if you tail hook them or you back hook them, a lot of times the minnow will twist your line up. And when you're using these spinning reels, you always get a twist in the line anyway, but you try to keep it down to a minimum. So I like to keep my minnow straight in line with my hook, and that way it's a little easier to keep your line from twisting up. And you can kind of work your jig through that debris and that brush and those limbs down there a little more safer without getting hung up. Actually, your jig head is guiding your minnow where you want it to go. And if you tail hook them, a lot of times the minnow will swim off and swim you down into a tree limb or swim you down in that stuff and get you hung up. When I pitch this jig out there to these lay down logs, you know, I'm following my bait down, and I'm watching my line fall. As the jig falls, I'm watching the line kind of feed out. When that line stops, either you're on a limb or a fish has come up underneath of it and picked it up. Okay, so it's not all the time that you get slack in the line. You get a bag in your line, and the way you can detect whether that's a fish or not is to put a little pressure on your rod tip. Lift your rod tip up a little bit and see if you can feel that fish do a little wiggle or a movement on it. Then you know that you need to set the hook. If you pull up and your rod tip kind of bends and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier, usually you're over a limb or you're over a log, and it's really not a fish. But about 50-50, you know, a lot of times it is a fish and a lot of times it's just a snag. But like I say, you can't fish scared. You got to get down in that stuff. A lot of times you go down and you hit bottom and you get bag in your line. Just pick it right back up about a foot and hold it. A lot of times you're right in that stuff and you want to hold that jig in there as long as you possibly can. See if those fish will come up out of that stuff and hit it.